PM is an unfair job. You do need a good level of technical understanding to succeed as an AI product manager. I've been coaching a lot of people to get these AI PM jobs, and the ones who actually get AI PM jobs, they either built really important AI PM features at their company, that's one good way, or as a side project. In fact, a lot of people, they say, hey, I work at a bank. We're never gonna build an AI feature. And I'm like, well, we can still get you into AI PM. You need to create an AI product yourself. To get a product management job out of MBA, you've just put yourself in one of the hardest positions of all product management job seekers. What differentiates the top 5 from the bottom 95? This might surprise people, but I think the number one thing is how they manage their own mental state.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show Beyond the Grind. Here on this show, I invite people from different business careers to talk about their learnings, mistakes, and skills, but from a very tactical lens so that you can apply these learnings today. I'm Arushi. I'm a student at Indian School of Business and previously has been a product manager working with a startup in India. In today's episode, I've invited someone from whom I and many of my peers in the product community have learned immensely from. His newsletters are filled with deep insights, nuanced comparisons, and first principle thinking. This is Aakash Gupta, who runs product growth newsletters and podcasts. He has led multiple product teams from different scales, from gaming to Apollo, and also is a Wharton alum. In this episode today, we are going to learn about how to build product management careers in AI, how to build the right product, and his reflections from his Wharton MBA. So let's start with the podcast and invite Aakash. Hi Aakash, welcome to the show and thank you so much for doing this. I'm super excited to see how this episode turns out to be. First, I want to take some time to appreciate you. I've been following you and your newsletters and now podcasts for almost 2 years. All of your newsletters that I've read till date have always been filled with insights, research that have kept me so hooked. The consistency of your newsletters, the research that you bring in are incredible. So thank you so much for doing this. And I think you're doing a service to the product community by leaving your full-time job and working as a content creator here full-time. So thank you so much for doing this. How does it feel to leave your job with Apollo and now working as a full-time content creator? How's it going for you?
I think it's the fastest growing job actually in America. I heard something like now 11 million people in the US have become full-time creators. And it kind of makes me laugh because I'm kind of like a trend hopper. When I started out of college, product management was a thing. Then I became a founder. I even did a stint in management consulting. So I've just hopped all of the trends. The latest trend is being a creator. But I think for me, it does come from a deep place of interest. Having been a founder, having been a consultant, having been a product manager, I think those are actually the perfect skill sets because as a consultant, you need to present documents. As a product manager, you need to have that deep product expertise. And then as a founder, now I have to manage a team. Now I have to handle payroll, expenses, taxes. So I think all of my experiences have kind of come together to culminate in what I'm doing now.
Wow, it seems like you've come full circle from being a product manager to founder now. What are you enjoying more? Were you enjoying your work at Apollo more or your content creator journey now?
So I think that it goes back to my principles. My principles, like what motivates me in life, making an impact, also earning a lot while also having time for my family. I have 2 young kids. And for me, this kind of exceeds being a VP of product at a unicorn on all 3 of those principal dimensions. So in terms of impact, been able to really scale the breadth of my newsletter faster, been able to write more often and make more impact on more PMs. In terms of earning, I'm already earning more than I was as a VP of product. And each year I work on this, I'm seeing anywhere from 50 to 150% growth. So I'll be able to continue growing it faster and faster above and beyond that. And then most importantly, time. I have full control over my time. I remember when I was a VP, if there was an interesting discussion happening with the senior leadership team at Friday at 11 o'clock, it was my job to be a part of that discussion. Now, if there's some interesting discussion, usually I'm going to be the one driving it. Or if it is happening with my team at Friday at 11, it's my choice whether or not I want to join that. So the control in particular over my time has been the best, where I think I was working roughly 60-hour weeks as if VP. As a creator, I tend to work like roughly anywhere from 35 to 45 hours, so a lot less.
Wow, that's a 50% reduction straight. I want to talk to you about this personal branding and brand building stuff more, but we can talk about it later in the podcast. Let's first start with building product management careers in AI. And for that, let's first talk about what do you mean by product management careers in AI? Does this mean a product manager who's building an AI capability into their product? Does this mean a product manager building an AI product? Or is it simply someone who's using AI in their day-to-day life? What does this mean according to you?
You exactly broke it down how I would break it down. So the first one you said is PMs building AI products. These would be what we think of as the product manager on ChatGPT, the product manager on Google Gemini. Then there's product managers building AI features into their products. So when I was at Apollo, we built an AI email writer. So that was a feature within Apollo that was AI driven. And then there's everybody else who's the AI powered PM. And so the way I think about it is like they're kind of AI PMs in that first category, AI feature PMs in that second category, and AI powered PMs in the third category. So no matter what type of PM you are, you have to care about AI. And the funny thing is a lot of AI powered PMs become AI feature PMs because AI is infecting all of our software. And a lot of AI feature PMs, they then look at the opportunities that these true AI PMs are having, both in terms of compensation and impact, and they often will want to go become AI PMs.
Wow, that's such an interesting insight. Would you recommend to all the product managers or most of the product managers that sometime in future they should transition their careers into AI? Would you recommend that?
No, definitely not. I think that if you think about a lot of the worst implementations of AI that we've seen, it's when your software is solving some core job to be done, and then they just stick AI on top of it. In fact, I made this mistake when we were writing the AI email writer at Apollo, which is that we would put in like the AI suggested email as your blank state. But people didn't like that. They actually preferred to see a blank canvas. And so sometimes it is better to not shove AI into everything. But the angle that PMs should be thinking about is how do I use AI tools to succeed? And I love how Tal Raviv says it. PM is an unfair job. So work unfairly. And it's unfair because you're given responsibility for metrics where you don't even have authority over the designers, engineers, and other product teams who are affecting those metrics. You're given responsibility over deadlines when you're not actually building the thing. You're given responsibility to achieve OKRs when there are so many other people involved. And so there's so many dimensions that make this role unfair. So why not work unfairly? Why not use ChatPRD to create your PRDs? Why not use Perplexity to do your competitive research? Why not use Claude to write your strategy documents? Now, if there were any of those three tools that I just mentioned that you're not an expert in, that's an opportunity for you to go learn those tools. And that's the key, is what tool is best for a given activity changes every 3 months. So you need to stay on top of all of the AI tools out there and keep trying them and keep seeing which ones you like for what activities.
Understood. In all of this, what are the AI tools and products that you use? And more importantly, how do you keep yourself updated with what tools and products are coming into the market? What is your source of information and how do you keep experimenting?
So my day-to-day, like my main product is the newsletter and the podcast. So I basically need tools that help me in those workflows. And because I'm creating content, I'm also consuming a lot of content. So where I learn about AI tools personally is AI Twitter and AI LinkedIn. So there are some really, really phenomenal creators out there. On Twitter, I really like Rowan Chung, Min Koo, and just the first person sources. The CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, is always on Twitter. The president of OpenAI, Greg Brockman, is always on Twitter. The leader of Google, Dario Amodei, that's actually Anthropic. The leader of Google, I forget the man's name, they're all posting on Twitter. So Twitter is one interesting place to learn. Same with Perplexity, Arvind Srinivas, right? They're all posting on Twitter. So that's one good place. And then LinkedIn, I find, is really good for the uses. So I really like, for instance, Ruben Hassid, who really creates these carousels, which says like, hey, if you want to build something, first you should get the topic from Pinterest, then you should put it into Perplexity topics, then you should generate it using ChatGPT, then you should edit it using EasyGen, they should create the image using Midjourney. He'll create these huge carousels that walk you step by step through things. So those are my two sources of information about what tools exist and other people are using, and then just trying them out myself. And for me, I don't like just trying out a tool for trying out a tool. I feel like what ends up happening is I look at my priority to-do list and I say, that's not the highest priority item, right? So instead, what I try to do is I try to use my to-do list and I try to integrate using a new tool with that to-do list. So I just heard, for instance, that Grok released a new image model. XAI released a new image model. I learned that through Twitter. So the next time I wanted to create an image for a post that was AI generated, instead of immediately going to my favorite current tool, which is Midjourney, I went over to Grok and I tried it on Grok. And so actually one of my recent posts, you guys might have seen this post, it was the story of Sarah and how she failed her Google PM interview. That was an AI generated image from Grok. So I had used that tool purposefully, and ultimately I came to the conclusion that Grok isn't still as good as Midjourney, but I published the Grok image because I was just playing around with Grok and getting that item off my to-do list. And for the next one, I will head back to Midjourney. And so that's personally my process. And the tools that I use, if you think about it, I typically use 3 tools the most. So number one is that Claude. So I think Claude is a much better writer than ChatGPT. Then number 2 is Perplexity. I think Perplexity is a much better searcher than Google. And then number 3, I use EasyGen, which is actually created by Ruben Hassid, which is really good at creating copy for social media. Because if you look at copy on social media, it's not like copy in a newsletter or copy you might write and submit to your paper at ISB, because there's very short sentences. There's a lot of white space. There's a rhythmic quality to the writing. There's a musical quality, and also it has to visually look good. And so those are the 3 main tools I use. But I use a litany more. I already mentioned Midjourney. I mentioned ChatPRD if I'm creating a PRD example. Obviously, I use ChatGPT. Claude has really horrible limits. So the way my mental process works is, how important is this prompt? And how am I going to use it? If I'm going to use it in my writing, for instance, then it needs to go to Claude. But if I'm just using it for my personal, like right now I'm looking into a health issue that I have, then I'll just go use ChatGPT, because the limits are so much higher for how much you can interact with ChatGPT. So my A queries, A prompts go to Claude, and my B prompts go to ChatGPT. And maybe even further, C and D, I'll keep trying to test like what Meta has, what Gemini has. And so I might even try those occasionally.
Wow. That's an interesting way to look at finding out tools, because in our day-to-day life, our priority list is full of tasks and our day-to-day jobs. And in that, experimenting a product never comes on the top or to your list. So yeah, why not couple your work with the tool that you want to experiment? Incredible insight. Whenever I hear about PM in AI, it feels that one needs to know deep sense of technical knowledge about how data models are built, what are the different kinds of data models, etc., etc. What is your take on this? That how much a product manager needs to be updated with what's happening in the AI community, more on the technical front rather than the application front for transitioning into this career?
So there's this hilarious thing that goes on with product management as a whole, which we all know, which is that to succeed at product management interviews and to get a product management job is often very different from the job itself. And we all know this because we've all prepared the product design case study, design a pencil for the blind. But do you ever design a pencil for the blind in your job? Do you even have enough control over what you're working on to approach a problem like that? Of course not, right? It's very different in real life. And the same is true for AI product management, which is that to get an AI product manager job, what you need to do is pretty different from what's going to help you succeed in that AI product manager job. So let's first start with what is going to help you succeed, because I want to be super clear about this. You do need a good level of technical understanding to succeed as an AI product manager. And here's why. Your normal product management team has engineers, designers, maybe research if you're lucky, maybe analytics if you're lucky, and then stakeholders and executives. Your AI product management team has engineers and researchers that are AI researchers, not user researchers. Those are the two main groups. You'll be lucky if you have a designer. Maybe you have a designer, maybe you don't. And so your constituents go from user researchers, engineers, and designers to AI researchers and AI engineers. To influence these people, you have to be somewhat technical. They can't throw out a term like transformers and you not intuitively understand very deeply what transformers are, who even published the transformers when they first came out, which was Google DeepMind, how companies are using them, which is transformers are used to take the input from a user and transform it and identify what are the most salient points of their input in order to create the output. So you need to intuitively, deeply understand the basics of AI, like transformers. But beyond just the basics, you need to be able to talk about what they're building. So an AI researcher, an AI engineer, they might be going into data pipelines. They might be cleaning the data. So then you need to understand that. They might be going deep into the neural network, where they're thinking about, should we use a convolutional neural network here, or should we use a different type of neural network? You need to be able to chime in on those discussions. So that's what you need to do to succeed as an AI PM, is you need to have that authority, that gravitas, because they're not going to listen to you if you can't chime into these discussions. Now, what do you need to do to get an AI PM job? Here's where it actually ramps up even more. The fact of the matter is that AI PM is the most in-demand subsector of PM right now. So you can imagine all of the PMs in the world are applying for these AI PM jobs at OpenAI, at Anthropic, at Google, at Microsoft, at Meta. And so a lot of the technical PMs are applying, who maybe even really common. You look at Marilyn Nika, she has a PhD in AI. Now she's an AI PM at Google. That's your competition. So if you don't have a PhD in AI, you need proof that you have the fluency at that level of that PhD in AI. So I highly recommend to people that they go through and they actually read the original research papers, that they go find Andre Karpathy's YouTube channel, where he step-by-step shows you how to build GPT-2, and you step-by-step build ChatGPT-2 yourself. I highly recommend this from people. And then I have an article called Everything You Need to Know About AI. You should understand deeply everything in there about that article. In each section of that article, I link you out to key resources to go further. You should read all of those key resources to go further. And it doesn't stop there. I've been coaching a lot of people to get these AI PM jobs. And the ones who actually get AI PM jobs regularly, they either built really important AI PM features at their company. That's one good way. Or as a side project. In fact, a lot of people, they say, hey, I work at a bank. We're never going to build an AI feature. And I'm like, well, we can still get you into AI PM. You need to create an AI product yourself. And so they will often create a product that charges money. And once they get to $2,000-$3,000 in monthly recurring revenue, that's when the interviews really start opening up for them. And not only do the interviews start opening up, which are so hard to get, but they actually start succeeding, because when they ask you a question like, hey, what AI model would you use for this problem? You can actually relate back to your product. You can say, well, I evaluated these 3 AI models. I looked at cost. I looked at how quick they responded. I looked at what the message response limits were. And I also looked at the quality of the response. And ultimately, when I weighed against those factors because of X and Y reasons, I chose this model. If you can tell those real world stories like that when they ask a hypothetical question, you're much more likely to succeed.
Such an interesting answer. Whenever we've talked to someone about how to transition into a product management career, from a fresher's standpoint, we've always heard this answer that build a product, go do case studies, feature deep dives. But nobody has ever given me this answer that build a product and book some revenues for it, even if it is $2-3 a month. Because with this, I'm not only learning about consumer insights and preferences, execution, but also about how can I inculcate business model into this product. So that's a very interesting answer. And I want to get deeper into what you define as that good amount of knowledge that you mentioned in your previous answer. Right now, the percentage of AI PMs to total number of PMs is really small. But as we see this applications of AI increasing, this number is also going to increase. So when does someone say that I have enough knowledge to sit for an interview and I can learn the rest on the go? How do you define this good amount of knowledge?
Yeah, it depends a lot on your own background. So here's the thing. If you have a PhD in AI like Marilenika, they're probably not going to ask you those basic questions. So she might even be able to afford to forget some. Let's be honest. How much do we remember from when we were in school 10 years ago? Not so much. But she has that credential there. Surprisingly enough, if you don't have that credential, it becomes more important for you to nail those questions. And so the way to think about it is, how much does my background show AI knowledge? Do I have a degree, a computer science degree specializing in AI? That's going to be the best. If I don't, do I have a regular AI degree or a computer science degree? Those things, counterintuitively enough, lower your bar in these interviews for how well you need to answer these foundational, conceptual questions. And similarly, if you've built AI features, if you were an AI PM, what's really common is people will be an AI PM at a lesser company. Maybe you were an AI PM at Interpret. So Interpret is a fast-growing AI startup. Or maybe you're an AI PM at Scale AI. That has a similar effect to that Marilenika AI PhD.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about interview success, which again, the bar for interview success is higher than the bar for the job. So that's why we're talking about the bar for interview success. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a background, you need to have more knowledge. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's so important. And here's also what I would try to tell people, there is nothing that you learn in a degree that you can't learn at a public library. What the degree does is it gives you a curriculum. It gives you a bunch of books and articles to read. It gives you quizzes and exams to make sure you actually digested what you got out of those articles. So give yourself an AI degree. And what I tell people is that it's not going to take as long as you think. I think that, that article, Everything You Need to Know About AI, that article probably took me something like 100, 200 hours of research. You can do the same thing in 100, 200 hours of very directed research, where you figure out what are my gaps in my knowledge? What do I not know? And then go super deep on those areas. And then take some time towards the end of those 100, 200 hours to practice mock interview questions to say like, What is a transformer? What AI model would you use? What is your favorite UX for a current conversational chatbot? Like if you go through some of these basic questions and you get yourself super dialed in, you can actually teach and learn this to yourself. And it might take 100, 200 hours if you don't have that AI PhD degree. If you do have it, it might just take 30 to 40 hours. So that's how I would think about it.
At first, it sounded counterintuitive, but I agree. The bar of an interview is much higher than what you need to do on the job. So it's better to prepare for an interview, develop your technical knowledge according to interview, and rest you can manage on the job. Makes a lot of sense. My next question is, imagine that you are graduating for Wharton this year. Which industry, or in particular, which AI product or application of AI you would work or build as a product manager or founder? What are your thoughts there? Where would you want to build?
I guess coming out of MBA, from the people I've coached, is the single hardest time to get a product manager job. And it's even true for former product managers, where you get put back into this MBA bucket. And product management, 95% of product management happens with just-in-time hiring. Very little of product management happens with what MBAs want, which is like consulting, investment banking style. I got my offer in the fall. Now I can cruise for winter and spring, right? So to get a product management job out of MBA, you've just put yourself in one of the hardest positions of all product management job seekers. And so the first thing I would say is it's highly unlikely you can be picky about which industry or which application layer you're going after, but you can be strategic. And you can be strategic in the way that you should try to sequence the areas you're most going after later in your process. Because the fact of the matter is you're going to be better at interviewing, better at customizing your resume, better at doing interview follow-ups, better at building interview work products, better at writing cover letters, better at targeting companies and targeting jobs at the right role that you have candidate market fit for at the end of your job search. So you want to put those companies that you really want to get jobs at, those application layers, those industries that you really want to get jobs at the end of your search. So who would I put at the end of my search personally? Where I like to think about this is more of like a first principles point of view. Like, which parts of the AI products are most defensible? Which ones of the AI products are paying the best? And which companies have the brightest future? So if you look at where the enterprise value within AI has accrued, the vast majority of the enterprise value has accrued at NVIDIA. And so NVIDIA would be one of my top employers to work at. Yeah. And what would you be working on? You'd be working on CUDA, which is their programming interface for programming GPUs to run neural networks more efficiently. So that would be one big area I'd want to learn about. And then I'd also want to think about the competitors to NVIDIA, because they could potentially steal some of that enterprise value. So there's this startup called Grok, G-R-O-Q, not the G-R-O-K I was talking about earlier, which is X's AI model, but G-R-O-Q, which is making AI chips. Or over at Google, they are making TPUs, which are also AI chips. Over at Amazon, they're making these specific ASICs for AI. So of what industry or application would I prioritize? So most of the money has really gone to the chip companies, if you think about it. NVIDIA has acquired something like $2.6 trillion in enterprise value. That's more than basically any other segment of AI. So I'd also look at all their competitors. Grok, G-R-O-Q, Google's TPUs, Amazon's ASICs. And of course, you can't leave out the traditional semiconductor players like Samsung and other players like that. So I would think about this entire space of programming chips to run AI models. Who has generated the second most amount of enterprise value? It's got to be OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, the generators of the foundational models. So the next area I'd target is trying to be a PM on one of these foundational models. And then third, who has generated the next most amount is these AI wrappers, which sit on top of the foundational models. And if you look at those wrappers, they've penetrated every single category of software. They've penetrated SaaS, they've penetrated consumer tech, they've penetrated fintech, they've penetrated social media, so every single area. So within those areas, I would personally go to what's your personal background? Because again, out of MBA, it's so hard to get these PM jobs. If you personally worked in social media before, then you should try to target social media. You'll just have more candidate market fit there. If you worked in, I know somebody who worked in aerospace, he worked in defense. So we're really targeting defense applications of AI. Who's a company who's doing a lot of that? Palantir. So Palantir is his top choice. So that's personally how I would think about prioritizing these areas with the context that it's so tough out there for MBAs that you should really think about where your candidate market fit will be.
Can't agree more. Here as well, not many product management companies can give you a notice of 6 months and they want you to join as soon as possible. So yeah, I agree there. And are there any Indian companies that you're excited about that you think are going to make strides in AI? Anything. And it's okay if there are none.
Oh, so many. I mean, I think literally like every software company in the world is going to be doing stuff with AI. So all of the classic sexy tech India companies, they will be doing something with AI. Personally, for me, if I had to name like 4 or 5 off the top of my head that I think will be pretty interesting. So one is this concept that I believe most countries will be creating their own foundational model. So then you want to say, okay, in India, who is probably going to be that? Well, obviously, there are 2 main tech giants. There's Reliance and there's Tata. So one of those is most likely, when you look at market cap, going to be creating, or probably already is in the process of creating, a foundational model for India. And most likely governments are going to start to fund these because they're going to want to have their own country's foundational model. So who's most likely to get that government funding? Think about that yourself and then think about what other companies might be on the list outside of the 2 that I mentioned. Then what are those sexy Indian companies in terms of really good consistent growth, profitable companies? One of the companies that comes to mind, for instance, is Zoho. They're finally competing with Microsoft on the full enterprise stack. You can imagine they're probably putting AI in all of their products, just like Microsoft is putting AI into all of their products. And then you go to all of the really sexy startups that we've all been thinking about. Within the e-commerce space, it's really interesting to think about how these quick delivery, how these quick commerce companies, even the recently IPO'd companies like Swiggy and different ones would be using AI. So I think those are very, very high potential options. And then within the fintech space, thinking about how your Razorpays of the world, and then within the gaming space, thinking about how your Nazara Tech, your MPL, your different companies that are really succeeding would be using AI. So when it comes to AI, it's going to affect every industry. And more importantly, I would say, is think about where is your interest lie just from a pure industry point of view. Then take the AI lens after that.
Many of the people who are listening to this podcast are junior PMs or people who are going to transition into PM careers with 2 to 3 years or 0 years of experience as well. What do you think, in your experience, differentiates the top 1% or 5% PMs from the rest of the PMs in this industry, whether it's AI or non-AI? What is your opinion on that?
Okay, so top 1% PMs versus the other 99% of PMs, or the other 95% of PMs and top 5% of PMs is actually a different answer. So let's first start with top 5% of PMs. What differentiates the top 5 from the bottom 95? This might surprise people, but I think the number one thing is how they manage their own mental state.
Yeah.
If you go check product management subreddit and you sort by top posts, it's PMs complaining about their jobs. I work in a feature factory. My engineering manager is making all the decisions. My designer actually owns the roadmap. My CEO keeps forcing features down my throat. That's what you hear. I have too many meetings. I have too much work. I'm working too hard. I don't get vacation. How you handle your mental state as a product manager has a huge impact. This is a lonely job. There's nobody there to commiserate with you when you have a failure, when a designer repudiates your idea, when an engineer doesn't build what you wanted them to build, when an executive completely destroys your roadmap. You can't even empathize really with your manager because your manager is going to be judging you on how you react to these things. And so it's your own internal ability to handle this stressful job that doesn't have as many highs. You know, I worked at other jobs like founder, consultant, different things. They have more highs. Like there's more elements throughout the day where you're receiving positive feedback than product manager. And there's less times when you get something that just completely blows up everything you were working on. You just get reorged as a PM and then you have to go learn a totally new area. But that's life. And enjoying the job. That's the first thing I see with those top 5% of PMs is they manage to continue to love the job 10 to 15 years later. They manage to roll with the punches and have that positive attitude. And if I break down what's driving that for them, the most important thing is actually this idea of an internal locus of control and having this growth mindset that yes, bad things are going to happen, but in terms of what I can control, and I can control a lot, there's a lot of positivity going on. And so that's one really important element for these top 5% PMs. The second important element for these top 5% PMs is that they are obsessed with their customers and they do not work at a place where their access to customers is inhibited. You know, one of the funny things for me, working as a PM for 16 years and then becoming a content creator, is I didn't realize how many PMs don't have access to their customers. There are so many PMs who the sales team is gaining access, or they work in a regulated industry, so they just can't reach out. It's a very common occurrence, and it's almost impossible to be a top 5% PM if that's the case. So what do? Well, you need to work with your sales team to create tours where you go tour customers and your sales team is with you. If you're in a regulated industry, you know, what I often recommend to people is create your own network of customers that are your friends, because your company can never say you can't go talk to your friends. Yeah. And so go build friends that you can text message, because your company is never going to say you can't text message on your own personal time. But you need to be really close to customers. And on top of that, you need to explain to your executives, no, we don't want to ship this big feature until we put the prototype in front of users. No, we don't want to ship this big feature to everybody until we do an alpha and a beta rollout. So that's the second important thing, is iterating with your customers and deeply understanding your customer needs. And most importantly, overcoming the obstacles that your company is putting in the way of getting in touch with those customers. And then the third most important thing for these top 5% PMs is this horrible phrase, product sense. But why does Shreyas Doshi sell a $2,000 course on product sense? It's because it does matter. And there's a huge curve. Like what I would say is, like, if you kind of mapped out on the x-axis all PMs, and on the y-axis, their product sense, you know, it would be something like this, which is to say that the majority of PMs have very little product sense. And as you get into this top 5% of PMs, they're living in this world of product sense that is just 100,000 times different product sense than your average PM. And so what is product sense? How do you develop it? You know, I can't go through his entire course just now, but I can give you some keys, which is a really strong intuition for what works, really high standards, and a really intuitive understanding of not just the customer, which we talked about in point 2, but what sits at the intersection of what the customer needs, what the business needs, and what's recently technologically possible. So that's product sense, and those are the 3 factors that take you to the top 5%. But in my opinion, there's a different set of factors that then take you to the top 1%. When we're talking about the top 1%, the first most important thing we're talking about is insane company and job selection. This is the chess to your career, not the checkers, but actually choosing the right companies to work at where you have the good role. And then within the companies, choosing the surface areas within the product where building in that area is going to drive the most ROI. So this career chess, that's very important for the top 1%. You simply can't be a top 1% PM if you aren't working at a top 1% tech company. Unfortunate reality. Second thing is that these people have amazing ability to time manage. And what I mean by that is there are certain things that you need to do an amazing job on. These are in your LNO framework, your leverage tasks, your PRDs, your product strategies, your future results write-ups, your roadmaps. Those things you need to do an amazing job. But there are certain things that are neutral, how quickly you're responding to Slack messages, how quickly you're responding to emails, how you're filling out HR forms. And then there's things that are overhead, like updating your latest VP's new OKR tracker with the most insights, updating some random stakeholder in marketing who really wants something out of you. Those become overhead tasks. And your top 1% PMs are so good at getting rid of overhead tasks, saying no, just doing enough on their neutral tasks, and then crushing their leverage tasks. And I have to say, personally for me, sometimes what prevented me from being in the top 1% was this crushing leverage tasks. When I think back to my top 1% PM colleagues, they would stay up all night before an important product strategy was due. They would go the extra mile to really do a good job on those leverage tasks. And that's probably the third element is, let's be honest, this is not a job where you can work 40 hours and be in the top 1%. Your top 1% PMs, they have built a life that accommodates their job. Either they don't have kids, they don't have a wife, so they don't have to do that whole bit, or they say no to their friends a lot, or they have a lot of help at home where they're recruiting their grandparents and their nannies to help with their kids so that they can put in the extra time. But I find that to really crack that top 1%, you do have to be doggedly obsessed with the job.
I never thought about the 1%, 5% pool in such a manner, especially where you said that how you need to get access to your customers, even if you don't have that, how you need to learn to say no to management, especially in day-to-day hustle, where you sometimes get tired and you're like, okay, I can't fight this battle anymore. And you just end up saying yes. And just sheer hard work and how you can leverage high impact task and do a neutral or a normal work on your low impact task. And I really like how you never once said that if you are in a difficult situation, quit the company, or if the company is not right, quit the company. You've always given me a way to work around that particular situation. So I really like that. With this, we can conclude the first part of the episode with Aakash Gupta. In this episode, we talked about how to build product management careers in AI. And in the second part, we are going to talk about how to build the right product growth, and his reflections about his Wharton MBA. So stay tuned to check out the next episode, and I hope to see you guys again there. Thank you so much.